So my name is Maria. I'm the CEO and founder of Linkia. I'm Australian, living in Spain, and I started Linkia 3 years ago. It's very much a passion of mine. The vision of Linkia is to help social networks monetize their platforms. It's to help online communities and groups stay alive and be highly engaging for the members that join. And of course, it's to help agencies and brands find ways to reach where these communities are and also engage them in a very meaningful way rather than advertising to them as they traditionally do online.
So what would be like the do's and don'ts that a brand should do to reach a community?
Okay, so the first step that a brand needs to look at is, what does that brand stand for? What do they have a right to talk about? For example, Hummer cannot talk about environmental issues. Okay, so if we have a look at a brand, one of the examples that we mentioned this morning was Magnum, the ice cream. So what does Magnum stand for? Well, it stands for escapism, it stands for strength because of the way that the Magnum is shaped and when you bite into it. And so they can talk about topics that are centred around what that brand stands for. Once a brand has identified or would already know what they stand for, then they need to set objectives. You know, why is it that they want to reach out to communities? Okay, and which communities do they want to reach out to? To start with, you just start with a few communities. It's not about going to masses of communities because we're all learning in this process. So perhaps just select 1, 2, 3 different types of communities that you can then start to test. Okay. And in selecting those communities, the next step is to set objectives for that campaign. Okay, so what's the overall objective? Are you wanting to create visibility and exposure around your brand to a new set of people, or are you wanting to increase sales, or are you wanting to do market research? You know, what are really the overarching objectives? Okay, and once you've set your objectives, then what's the big story? Okay, so you've identified communities and groups of people, then what kind of story are you going to go to them with? Okay, and once you've identified your story, then what's the content? Okay, so you're going to feed the communities with videos, with photographs, with links to surveys, with conversations. You're not coming into these communities and advertising. Advertising just doesn't work. People aren't interested in being advertised to. You know, how are you going to engage them? And then once you know how you're going to engage them with what type of content, then what are the success metrics? What does success look like? How many people do you want to click on your video? How many people do you want to share the images? How many people do you want to perhaps upload some content around that campaign? So it's fairly straightforward.
All right. There are also a lot of brands which are creating their own communities, like, for example, Nike Plus for the runners or Lego for their enthusiasts and so on. So it's brands who are powerful enough to gather their fans around their own values, which is completely different than tapping into an existing community. What do you say about that? Is it something which is accessible to everyone?
Yeah, brands creating their own communities if they know what they're doing is a fantastic idea. It's like if we like the brand Nike, then we want to go into a Nike store because Nike's offering us an experience around their brand, okay? But if we're not really just looking at Nike, we're looking at the overall experience, then we may not want to leave our jogging community, we may not want to leave our mother's community or whichever community that we're in that Nike wants to engage with us in. And so brands need to look at it as a two-way approach. Number one, sure, create your community and really offer a deep, enriching experience within that community, but also look at an approach to identify where there's masses of other communities where people are spending time, because it's not realistic that those people are going to be spending 100% of their time in the Nike community. They'll be spending time in Facebook, they'll be spending time in LinkedIn and specialist communities like joggers communities. Okay, and so how can you achieve both and do it well?
Yeah, one thing that I kind of know is that communities, it's hard to infiltrate them for a brand, and just coming with a campaign which will not last a very long time is not something that communities really like. Maybe they like long-term involvement from the brand, you know. How do you advise brands about not being just there for a campaign to sell, but creating a relationship and a deep connection with the people from the community.
That starts with the overarching strategy from day one. Okay, so if a brand chooses to engage in communities, some brands may have campaigns that just last for a short period of time. For example, if Swatch is doing a campaign around the playground, which is a competition for artists, photographers and artists to submit competition entries, then that campaign may only last for 2 or 3 months, but then it may resume the following year, which is, the brand needs to look at it as, if I've invested time, resources, money into engaging with these community activities, then it's fertile ground to then re-engage at the right time. But it may not be appropriate to re-engage after that particular event is over. So for a community, it's very important to be transparent from the very beginning, to say, look, we want to engage with the members of your community for these reasons. This is what we're looking to get out of it. This is what we believe how it will benefit your members. And our plan is to run a campaign over 3 months. And then if everything goes well, then there's opportunities for us to have ongoing relationships. And then once the community agrees to that, then the community needs to communicate that message back to the members to say, hey, we're really honoured to have Swatch participate in our community over the next few months. They're running this wonderful campaign around the playground. We're going to encourage you to submit entries and let's comment and share. And so, again, it comes back down to communicating at the beginning and communicating at the end as well.
All right. Thank you very much for those words.
You.